When the HOA sent a demolition crew to tear down my lake cabin at 3 a.m., I thought they were finally done trying to bully me out. But they didn't count on my K9s, trained, fierce, and ready to defend. What started as a quiet night turned into a violent showdown on the water's edge, and what the demolition crew discovered beneath the surface changed everything. The moment the headlights sliced through the pre-dawn darkness, I knew they had come. I could hear the low rumble of the heavy machinery before the gravel cracked under the tires, and the familiar crunch told me the demolition crew wasn't coming for a friendly visit. My hands clenched tight around the leash as Max's muscles tensed beside me, and Roxy let out a soft growl that sent a chill up my spine. They could feel it, too, the threat that had been looming for weeks. The HOA had given me a final warning, a cold notice that this cabin, my sanctuary, was theirs to destroy. I had hoped they wouldn't actually show up at this hour, but there was no mercy in their plans. My dogs and I weren't about to let them take what was mine without a fight. The roar of the excavator engine grew louder, the massive claws swinging toward the porch that creaked under years of storms and quiet evenings by the lake. I could see the cruise leader yelling orders through the thick night air, his voice harsh and impatient, unaware of what waited for him. My fingers tightened on Max's collar, and I whispered, "Now." Max exploded forward, teeth bared and eyes blazing with a ferocity born of loyalty and years of training. Roxy surged after him, a shadow in the dark, her growl rising into a snarl that froze the crew in place. The driver's arm jerked back just in time to avoid Max's snap, and the worker stumbled backward, crashing into the dirt with a startled curse. "Get your dogs back," the foreman shouted, his confident mask slipping as panic flickered across his face. But Max and Roxy weren't about to back down. They circled, jaws snapping, teeth glinting in the glow of the machine's headlights. I stepped into the clearing, heart hammering in my chest, voice low but unyielding. "You don't touch this cabin." The crew hesitated, their orders suddenly meaningless against the living, breathing defense that stood before them. One man lifted a crowbar, desperate to assert control, but Max was faster. He lunged, teeth clamping onto the man's arm with a warning snap that made the man drop the weapon. The others exchanged looks, realization dawning that this was no ordinary trespasser's property. This was a fortress, guarded by two relentless protectors, and an owner who wouldn't back down. "You're wasting your time," I said, eyes locked on the foreman. "This cabin isn't going anywhere." Flames sparked in my mind as I fumbled for the flare in my pocket. A flick, a flame, and suddenly the yard was bathed in fiery orange light. The sudden brightness and the roar of the burning flare in my hand sent the crew scattering like startled birds. Boots pounded, shouts echoed, and the machines fell silent as the demolition crew fled into the night, leaving behind abandoned tools and shattered plans. The air hung heavy with adrenaline as the first hints of dawn kissed the lake's surface. Max and Roxy lay by my feet, alert and watchful, their chests rising and falling with steady breaths. My fingers trembled as I dialed the sheriff's number, reporting the illegal demolition attempt, the trespassing, the fight that had erupted under the cloak of darkness. The deputy's voice was calm but firm, assuring me help was on the way and that the HOA's reckless aggression would be investigated. The news spread like wildfire through the small community, dividing neighbors between shock, disbelief, and a begrudging respect. Some whispered that I'd gone too far, others hailed me as a hero, protecting what was rightfully mine. But beneath the surface, the tension simmered. Karen, the HOA president, had always hated my cabin, my independence, and now she had pushed things to the breaking point. That night, sleep was impossible. The shadows outside seemed to lengthen, stretching toward my windows with unseen eyes watching, waiting. Max and Roxy stayed at my side, their presence a solid comfort against the creeping dread. The cabin was more than wood and nails. It was my life, my memories, the place where I'd healed, grown, and fought for every inch of freedom. I wasn't about to let it be torn down by a callous bureaucracy or a vindictive neighbor. The war wasn't over, it had just begun. But with my dogs at my side, ready to fight tooth and claw, I knew I could stand against anything. In the days that followed, the HOA held emergency meetings, trying to spin the night's events in their favor, casting me as the aggressor and my dogs as dangerous animals out of control. But I had proof, videos, witness statements, the sheriff's report. I wasn't backing down, and neither were Max and Roxy. The community was watching, divided, but I felt a new kind of strength rising in me. This wasn't just about a cabin anymore. It was about standing up to bullying, reclaiming what was rightfully mine, and protecting the sanctuary I had built from the wreckage of spite and greed. Late one evening, the phone rang. A neighbor's voice, quiet and urgent, told me about strange lights seen near the lake, unfamiliar figures lurking close to the property line. I didn't hesitate. Max and Roxy and I moved silently through the trees, senses sharpened, muscles coiled for confrontation. The night was thick with anticipation, the kind that makes your skin crawl and your heart race. We found the intruders, men with tools, perhaps scouting for another attempt, their faces obscured by shadows. Max growled low, Roxy stepped forward, and the men scattered like ghosts, disappearing into the night before I could say a word. This was the life I'd chosen, the battle I'd sworn to fight. Every inch of that cabin, every memory inside it was worth protecting with blood and bark. And as long as Max and Roxy stood guard, as long as I held the keys in my hand, the HOA could send every demolition crew they wanted, but they wouldn't take my home without a fight. The war for my lake cabin was far from over, but for the first time I felt ready for whatever came next. The headlights pierced through the thick veil of fog like knives, cutting a sharp path across the lake's edge. The rumble of heavy machinery grew louder with every heartbeat, each vibration a silent warning that the nightmare was no longer a threat in the distance. It was here. The gravel beneath their tires cracked and shifted as the demolition crew's vehicles rolled onto my property, their engines roaring in the stillness of the early morning. Max was already alert, muscles coiled beneath his thick fur, eyes burning with fierce intelligence, while Roxy's low growl was a steady drum in the night, a warning no one should have ignored. The claw, the excavator, swung forward, poised to tear apart years of memories, sweat and blood. Yet I stood firm, gripping Max's leash tightly, feeling the tremble in my own hands. "Stay," I whispered, voice barely more than breath, but in that moment we were a single force, silent, deadly, prepared for the collision that would come without mercy. The crew leader shouted orders, his voice carrying arrogance, confidence that this was just another job, another structure to erase without question. Then, in a split second, everything erupted. Max lunged with a savage grace that surprised even me, teeth flashing like lightning as he snapped at the nearest man's arm. Roxy followed without hesitation, knocking a worker backward with a force that sent dirt flying and hearts racing. The workers froze, disbelief etched on their faces, realizing the battle was no longer one-sided. "Back off! Back off!" the foreman screamed, desperation bleeding through his commands as they scrambled to contain the fury unleashed against them. But Max and Roxy moved like shadows, agile and relentless, circling with teeth bared, eyes locked on every move. The foreman raised a crowbar, a futile attempt at dominance, but Max was quicker, teeth clamping onto the metal, wrenching it from the man's grasp. Panic rippled through the crew as the machines halted, their powerful engines now silent witnesses to the chaos unfolding. I stepped forward, heart pounding, voice steady despite the adrenaline surging through me. This cabin isn't going anywhere. Not while I'm here. The flare in my pocket felt like a lifeline. With shaking hands, I struck it, the sudden flare of fire casting the yard in an eerie orange glow that illuminated the tension and fear in the eyes of the crew. Shouts turned into cries as the men scattered, abandoning their tools and their plans in the face of an unexpected and unyielding defense. Boots thundered across the gravel as they fled, swallowed by the night, leaving behind a silent stick with the scent of burnt rubber and victory. Max and Roxy stood by my side, vigilant and proud, their chests rising and falling in unison with mine as the first light of dawn painted the sky in muted golds and pinks. The cabin stood battered but unbeaten, a testament to resilience and the fierce loyalty of those who protect what they love. I knew the fight was far from over, that the HOA's threats would not cease, but in that moment, with my dogs beside me and the morning breaking over the lake, I understood that some things, like home, like loyalty, were worth fighting for until the very end. The roar of the machines filled the night as the demolition crew surged forward, their boots pounding on gravel, engines growling with intent. I could feel Max's muscles ripple beneath his thick coat, every fiber of his being ready to spring into action, while Roxy's low, warning growl vibrated through the crisp air like thunder rolling in the distance. They didn't expect resistance, no one did, but the moment that claw smashed down onto the porch, everything changed. Max lunged with ferocity that left no doubt this was his territory, and he would defend it with every ounce of strength. Teeth snapped inches from the nearest worker's arm, a sharp warning that sent shivers down spines and froze some in place. Roxy was a shadow in the chaos, darting forward and knocking a man hard enough to send him sprawling backward, the dust rising in clouds around him. The men shouted, a mix of anger and fear, trying to regroup, but the dogs were relentless, moving with precision born from years of training and instinct. The foreman's face twisted with frustration, but even he hesitated, realizing that this demolition was not going as planned. Then a crowbar rose in defiance, a desperate attempt to regain control, but Max intercepted it with a snap of his jaws, forcing the man to drop the weapon with a curse. The workers exchanged looks. This was no ordinary property dispute. This was a battle for survival. I stepped forward, heart hammering, voice steady and cold. Leave now. This cabin isn't going anywhere. The glow of the flare in my hand suddenly lit the scene with fiery orange, a beacon in the dark that transformed the yard into a battleground. The crew's confidence shattered. Shouts turned to cries as they scrambled, abandoning machines and tools alike, retreating into the night. Boots pounded the earth, and the roar of engines faded into the distance. Silence settled, heavy and profound, broken only by the steady breaths of my loyal protectors beside me. The cabin stood battered but unbroken, a monument to defiance and determination. As the first rays of dawn kissed the lake's surface, I knew this war was far from over, but with Max and Roxy by my side, I was ready for whatever came next. The dawn came slow and heavy, the pale light slipping through the cracked windows, casting long shadows over the battered floorboards, the silence pressing down like a weight. Max lay at my feet, ears twitching at every distant sound. Roxy curled beside him, Muscle curled beside him, muscles tense beneath the quiet stillness. I moved through the cabin, every creak and groan a reminder of what the night had brought. Claws of steel swinging, voices shouting, chaos ripping through the air. The smell of burnt rubber lingered, mingling with the scent of pine and earth from outside, and beneath it all the undeniable pulse of adrenaline still thrumming in my veins. My hands trembled slightly as I pulled my phone from my pocket and dialed the sheriff's office, the line ringing once, twice, then a calm voice answered. I told them what happened: illegal demolition attempt, trespassing, destruction of property. The officer assured me they would send someone out, that the HOA's actions were reckless, out of line. I let the phone fall back into my hand, staring out at the still water, knowing the fight was far from over. The neighbors would talk, whispers spreading like wildfire, some siding with the HOA, others with me, but none could deny what had happened here. I remembered the look on Karen's face, the HOA president, cold, calculating, a woman who'd stop at nothing to see me gone, to erase the cabin as if it had never existed. My dogs stirred, sensing my unease, their eyes bright and watchful. The war wasn't just over wood and nails, it was over pride, over survival, over a home that meant more than a building. I didn't sleep. Not really. Every shadow seemed to shift. Every creak made me jump. But Max and Roxy never left my side, silent guardians in the deep dark. The community was split. Some called me a troublemaker, a thorn in their side. Others whispered admiration, calling me brave, stubborn, a woman who would fight for what was hers. Messages flooded in, support from unexpected places, warnings from others who dealt with the HOA's wrath. The HOA convened, their meeting filled with harsh words and thinly veiled threats, but their demolition plans halted, at least for now. The sheriff's deputies came by during the day, taking statements, inspecting the damage, their presence a thin line between peace and the next confrontation. I showed them the bite marks on the crowbar, the dents in the porch railing, the scattered debris where my dogs had fought to protect me. The deputies nodded, their expressions serious. "You have every right to defend your property," one said quietly, "but be careful. This won't be the last you'll hear from them." Karen's eyes met mine across the room one afternoon, icy and sharp, and I saw the fire there, the same fire burning inside me, only hers was fueled by anger and control, mine by desperation and love for what was mine. That look told me one thing: she wasn't done. My nights grew longer, the air heavier with tension. Strange sounds near the property line, shadows slipping just beyond the trees, a sense of being watched. Max and Roxy patrolled with me, their senses alert to every movement, every whisper. One night I caught a flicker of light, a flashlight maybe, or the reflection of something cold and metal, and I tightened my grip on the leash, heart pounding. We moved through the underbrush, silent and steady, until the figures scattered like ghosts before we could close the distance. The message was clear. The fight was escalating. I knew I couldn't rely on dogs and flare guns forever. The cabin was more than shelter. It was my legacy, the last piece of peace I had left, and I would defend it with every breath. Calls to lawyers, community meetings, attempts to negotiate, all met with stone walls and thin smiles. The HOA wielded bureaucracy like a weapon, their rules designed to wear me down, but I wasn't just a property owner. I was a guardian, a fighter. The cabin creaked under the weight of the day, but it stood. Max and Roxy were my constant companions, their silent presence a shield against the darkness creeping in from every direction. I learned to sleep with one eye open, to trust my instincts, to expect the unexpected. The quiet moments between storms were precious, the mornings when the lake shimmered under the sun and the only sounds were the birds and the gentle lap of water. But those moments were fragile, like glass ready to shatter. One afternoon, a letter slipped under the door, official, legal, a final warning, an ultimatum to vacate or face consequences. I read it over and over, the words burning on my skin, but my resolve hardened. This cabin was my home, my history, and I would not be driven out by threats or fear. Max whined softly, nudging my hand, and I knelt beside him, feeling the warmth of his fur, the steady beat of his heart. We were in this together. Whatever the HOA threw at me next, whatever darkness lurked just beyond the trees, I would stand. Because this was more than land and timber. This was my life. This was my sanctuary. And no demolition crew, no matter how ruthless or determined, would take it without a fight. The night was thick and heavy, pressing close against the windows like a living thing waiting for something to happen. Outside, the trees whispered in the wind, shadows shifting in the moonlight, hiding things I couldn't yet see. Max and Roxy sat at my side, alert, eyes glinting in the dim light, every muscle coiled and ready. The silence between us was taut, electric, filled with unspoken understanding. Something was out there. I could feel it, not just the usual night sounds or the rustling of wildlife, but something darker, more deliberate. The cabin felt too quiet, too still, as if it were holding its breath for what was coming. My fingers trembled as I loaded the last clip into the pistol, the cold metal a stark contrast to the heat rising in my chest. The phone buzzed softly on the table, a message from a neighbor, words too cautious, too cryptic to ignore. Strange lights near the property line, unfamiliar figures seen slipping between the trees. I glanced out the window, eyes straining against the black. Nothing. But the feeling didn't leave. "They're back," I whispered, barely moving my lips, and the dogs growled low in reply. I slipped on my boots and grabbed the flashlight, its beam piercing the dark as we stepped outside. The air was sharp with the scent of pine and damp earth, the lake a black mirror reflecting a sky full of indifferent stars. Max led the way, nose to the ground, muscles tense, tail stiff like a warning flag. Roxy flanked me, eyes flicking side to side, ears twitching at every sound. The crunch of leaves underfoot was loud in the silence, the beam of the flashlight cutting through the darkness like a sword. Shadows danced and leapt between the trunks, and I cursed my own imagination for conjuring shapes that vanished as soon as I looked directly at them. Then the noise, a faint crack, a snapped twig, a whispered step. We froze. The beam caught something, movement, a flash of dark fabric, a glint of metal. The intruders were close. Max growled deeper, his hackles rising. Roxy's lips curled, teeth shining like knives. I swallowed hard, heart pounding in my ears. "Stay calm," I muttered, more to steady myself than the dogs. We pressed forward, careful, silent, every sense stretched tight. The figures scattered before we could reach them, shadows dissolving into night like ghosts. But they were a message, clear and unmistakable. The fight was far from over. The cabin was a prize, a line drawn in the dirt, and they were willing to push, to provoke, to intimidate. I closed the door behind us, bolting it with a heavy clang that echoed too loudly in the dark. Inside, Max and Roxy settled into their watchful vigil, eyes never leaving the windows, bodies ready to spring into action. The weight of the night pressed down again, thicker than before, but I felt a flicker of something steadier rising inside me, determination, resolve, fire. This was more than a house. It was home, a sanctuary carved from years of struggle, love, in defiance, and I would protect it, no matter what came next. The phone buzzed again, another message, this one more urgent. They're watching. They're waiting. Be ready. I nodded to myself, setting the device aside. I wouldn't just be ready, I would be waiting too, waiting with teeth bared and muscles coiled, ready to defend every inch of what was mine. The night stretched on, endless and unforgiving, but I was not alone. I was never alone. Max's steady breath, Roxy's soft growls, the memories locked inside these walls, they gave me strength. The HOA's threats, their demolition crews, their secret trespassers lurking in the dark, they might think they held the power, but they had underestimated one thing. I was a guardian, and guardians do not back down. Not now. Not ever. The shadows outside shifted again, but this time I met them with a steady gaze. I was ready. Always ready. And the war for my cabin had only just begun.